The first rent check my son-in-law's mistress ever paid me was for $3,000. She handed it to me in a crisp, white envelope, her hands trembling so badly she could barely let it go. Her eyes, the same beautiful eyes that had looked at my daughter's husband with such illicit adoration, were now filled with tears of pure, unadulterated terror. And I just took the check, smiled my sweetest grandmotherly smile, and said, "Thank you, dear. I'll see you on the 1st of next month." Hi, everyone. I'm Grandma Margaret. My name is Margaret Stevens. I'm 79 years old, and I'm speaking to you from my quiet little home in a beautiful leafy corner of Georgia. This is a story about a secret so strange and so painful that I have never breathed a word of it to a single soul. My own daughter, my sweet, trusting Laura, she knows her husband left her. She thinks his business failed and he couldn't handle the pressure. She doesn't know the truth. She doesn't know that for a year, her charming, successful husband used my home, my sanctuary, as a love nest for him and his mistress. And she certainly doesn't know that for the last 6 months of their affair, that same mistress was secretly paying my rent at another apartment, her silence bought and paid for by the very woman she was betraying. They thought I was a sweet, naive old woman, a relic from another time who was too soft-hearted to see the viper she had welcomed into her nest. They mistook my kindness for weakness and my quiet nature for ignorance. They forgot that the quietest people are the ones who are listening the most. This is the story of how I took their dirty little secret and turned it into my own personal and very profitable retirement plan. Before I begin, I would be so grateful for your company on this journey. Please, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support is a comfort, and it gives me the courage to finally tell the story of how I stopped being a victim and became a landlord in the most unusual way imaginable. To understand the betrayal that happened in my house, you have to understand the love that built it. My life, my real life, was a 53-year love story with the most decent man God ever put on this earth. My husband, Frank, Dutty. I married Frank Stevens in 1964. He wasn't a man of big words or fancy dreams. He was a mailman. For 40 years, he walked the same route in our small town, delivering letters, packages, and a kind word to everyone he met. He was a quiet, steady, and deeply honorable man. His character was as reliable as the mail. It showed up every day, no matter the weather. He believed in simple things: a promise kept, a job well done, and coming home to a house filled with the smell of a good supper. He bought this house for me before we were even married, with the small savings he had put away. It's not a grand house. It's a simple, sturdy, 2-bedroom home with a big front porch and a garden out back that became my pride and joy. Our life within these walls was as simple and as good as the man I married. It was a life of shared coffee on the porch swing, of him reading the newspaper while I worked in my garden, of raising our daughter, Laura, in a home that was safe and full of a quiet, unshakable love. We weren't rich in money, but we were overflowing with the things that truly matter. Our Laura, born in 1971, was the sunshine of our lives. She was a sweet, gentle soul from the day she was born. She had her father's kind heart and my trusting nature. She was a dreamer, an artist, a girl who saw the good in everyone and everything. She hated conflict, and her deepest desire was to make everyone around her happy. I thought this was her most beautiful quality. I never imagined that her desperate need to see the good in people would one day blind her to the evil that was sleeping right next to her. When my Frank passed away from a sudden heart attack 6 years ago, while tending his rose bushes, the sun went out of my sky. The grief was a physical thing, a crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. I was 73 years old, and for the first time in my life, I was utterly alone in our quiet house. Laura was my saving grace. She was in her late 30s, living and working as a teacher in Atlanta, but she drove home every single weekend to be with me. She was my good, sweet, dutiful daughter. It was during this time that her fiancé, Greg, became a more permanent part of my life. I had always been so impressed by Greg. He was everything my daughter and I thought she deserved. He was a successful financial advisor, a man who moved through the world with a smooth, easy confidence that was mesmerizing. He was handsome, charming, and he treated my gentle, quiet daughter like a precious queen. After Frank's death, Greg was a pillar of strength. He was a master of quiet, competent sympathy. He handled the confusing paperwork for Frank's small life insurance policy. He helped me organize my finances, which were a mystery to me. He would sit and listen to me, talk about Frank for hours, his face a perfect picture of empathy and respect. "He was a great man, Margaret," he'd say, calling me by my first name in a way that felt modern and respectful. "He built a beautiful life for you. My only goal is to help you protect it." He saw the things around the house that needed a man's touch, and he did them without being asked. He fixed the dripping sink. He painted the porch trim. He was stepping into Frank's role as the quiet, capable protector of the house. And I, in my loneliness and my gratitude, began to see him as the son I never had. I trusted him completely. When he and Laura married a year later, I was the happiest mother in the world. I thought my daughter's future was secure, that she had found her own Frank, a man who would build a fortress of love around her for the rest of her life. The beginning of the end came, as it so often does, disguised as a problem that only I could solve. It was about 3 years ago. They came to me one weekend, their faces a carefully constructed performance of distress. Greg's financial firm, he explained, was going through a restructuring. He was leaving to start his own, independent advisory business. It was a huge opportunity, a chance to build his own empire. But it meant a period of financial uncertainty. "We're going to have to give up our expensive apartment in the city," he said, his voice full of a reluctant, responsible gravity. "We need to cut our overhead for a year or so, until my new business is on its feet." Laura, my sweet Laura, looked at me, her eyes wide with worry. "Mom," she said, "we were wondering, and please say no if it's too much, but could we possibly move in with you? Just for a year. It would be a lifesaver for us. And," she added, delivering the line that I now know was the key to the trap, "we could be here with you. We worry about you being all alone in this big house." It was a perfect pitch, designed to appeal to my love, my loneliness, and my desire to help my children. The thought of my quiet house being filled with life again, with my daughter and the man I had come to see as a son, was an irresistible balm to my grieving heart. "Of course," I said, my heart swelling. "This is your home? You stay as long as you need." They moved in the following month, and for a little while, it was wonderful. The house was full of laughter and energy. Greg was a whirlwind of helpfulness. He insisted on cooking gourmet meals for me. He organized my messy basement. He treated me like a queen. He set up a home office in the spare bedroom. He was always on the phone, his voice a confident, booming baritone, talking to clients and investors. I was so proud of him. I would sit in my living room and listen to him building his new empire from my spare room, and I would feel a sense of profound satisfaction. I was helping my children build their dream. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere began to change. The year stretched into 2. Greg's business was always on the verge of a huge deal that never quite materialized, and my role in the house began to shift. I was no longer the matriarch being cared for. I was the support staff. Since I was home all day, it was simply assumed that I would handle the cooking, the cleaning, the errands. My life became a series of tasks designed to make their lives easier. And then, the client meetings began. Greg started having to work late, hosting important clients in our home. The first time it happened, he was so apologetic. "Margaret," he said, "I'm so sorry to ask, but I have a huge potential client coming over this evening. A real whale. Would you mind just making yourself scarce? Maybe stay in your room? I need the house to feel like my own space, to project an aura of success." I understood, of course. I retreated to my bedroom, feeling like a proud, silent partner in success. I heard the client arrive. A woman. I could hear her light, musical laugh from the living room. I heard the clink of wine glasses. I heard them talking late into the night. This began to happen more and more frequently. The late-night meetings, always with the same female client. Sometimes, when Laura was working late at a school function, the meetings would go very, very late. The house that had once been my quiet sanctuary was now the backdrop for my son-in-law's bustling career. My daughter, my sweet, trusting Laura, saw nothing wrong. "Isn't it wonderful, Mom?" she would say. "Greg is working so hard. This new client, Jessica, he says she's going to be the one who makes his career. He has to put in the time to win her over." I felt a small, cold knot of unease forming in my gut. Something felt wrong. The late nights, the constant laughter, the way Greg would be so secretive about these meetings. But I pushed the feeling down. I told myself I was being a foolish, suspicious old woman. This was the modern world of business. I didn't understand it. Greg was a good man. He loved my daughter. I had to trust them. The moment that my quiet unease turned into a cold, sickening certainty came on a Saturday. Laura had to go out of town for the weekend for a teacher's conference. Greg was supposed to be working on a big presentation. That afternoon, his client, Jessica, arrived. They thought I had gone to my sister's house for the day. They thought they were alone. I was in my garden, in the back of the house, quietly tending my roses. And I saw them through the big window of the living room. They were not having a business meeting. They were in each other's arms. They were kissing, with a passion and a hunger that was so blatant, so utterly devoid of shame, that it stole the air from my lungs. I dropped my gardening trowel. The small metallic sound was lost in the afternoon breeze. I stumbled back, out of sight, my hand flying to my mouth. The world seemed to tilt and go gray. The man I had trusted as a son, the man who was living in my home, under my roof, was cheating on my daughter. In our living room, in the house her father had built for her. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, it felt like a physical blow. The quiet, trusting woman I had been died in that moment, in my garden, among my roses. And the woman who was left behind was a stranger to me. She was cold. She was clear-eyed. And she knew that her quiet, peaceful life was over. A war had been declared on her home, on her family. And she had to find a way to fight back. Seeing them through that window was like being struck by lightning. The world I had known, the family I thought I had, was burned away in an instant, leaving behind a smoking, ugly ruin. I stumbled back to my garden shed and sat on an overturned bucket, my body shaking with a silent, violent storm of emotions. Rage, grief, and a profound, bottomless sense of betrayal. My first instinct was the mother's instinct, to protect my child. I wanted to run into that house, to scream, to throw that woman out onto the street, to confront my son-in-law with his disgusting treachery. But a new, colder, more calculating part of me, a part I didn't even know existed, held me back. What would happen if I did? There would be a terrible, ugly scene. My daughter, my sweet, conflict-averse Laura, would be devastated. And Greg, I knew with a sudden, chilling certainty, would lie. He would twist the story. He would say I was a confused old woman, that I had misunderstood. He would paint me as a meddling, malicious mother-in-law trying to ruin his marriage. And my daughter, who was so deeply in love with him, who so desperately wanted to believe in the perfect life he had sold her, would be caught in the middle. She might even believe him. The thought was unbearable. No. A direct confrontation was what he would expect. It would give him the power to control the narrative. I could not fight him on his terms. He was a master of words, of manipulation. I was just a quiet old woman. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done. I stayed silent. I waited until I heard the woman's car leave. And then I walked back into my house, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I walked past the living room where my daughter's husband was sitting, reading the paper as if nothing had happened. I went to my room and I closed the door. The war had begun, but it would be a quiet one, a secret one. My life became a strange, double existence. On the surface, I was the same Margaret, the quiet, helpful mother-in-law, making dinner, tending my garden. But underneath, I was a spy in my own home. I was a quiet, invisible collector of evidence. My hearing, which they had so often joked was not what it used to be, suddenly became razor sharp. I learned to listen not to the words they were saying, but to the lies underneath. I listened to Greg's endless hushed phone calls, his voice a low, intimate murmur when he spoke to his client. I learned her name was Jessica. I learned that he was not just having an affair. He was building a second life with her. He was using my money to do it. The business expenses he would talk about, the fancy dinners, the weekend seminars, they were for her. He was whining and dining his mistress on my husband's legacy. He was using the money that was supposed to be securing my daughter's future to destroy it. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He would bring Jessica to my house, to our home, while my daughter was at work. He would entertain her in my living room, serve her wine in my glasses. I would be in my bedroom, the door closed, forced to listen to the sounds of their laughter, the low murmur of their conversation. It was a violation so profound, it felt like a physical illness. My home, my sanctuary, had been turned into a cheap motel, and I was the unwilling, silent manager. I tried to drop hints to my daughter. I tried to open her eyes without causing the explosion I so dreaded. "Laura, honey," I'd say casually. "Greg seems to be working so hard. These late nights with Jessica must be exhausting for him." But Laura, in her deep, unshakable trust, would just smile. "I know, Mom, but this is his big chance. Jessica is his most important client. He says she's connected to some very powerful investors. He has to put in the time." He had created a perfect cover story, and my daughter was its most ardent believer. She saw his long absences not as a betrayal, but as a sacrifice he was making for their future. She saw his exhaustion not as the result of a double life, but as the price of ambition. She was so proud of him, and her pride was a knife twisting in my heart. The most painful part was watching him lie to her face. He was a masterful actor. He would come home from an afternoon with his mistress and greet my daughter with a loving kiss, ask about her day, and tell her how much he had missed her. He would look into her eyes, her honest, trusting eyes, and he would lie with a smoothness that was reptilian. And she would believe him, every time. I was a witness to a crime, and the victim refused to believe a crime was being committed. My quiet rage began to curdle into a cold, hard resolve. My initial desire to protect my daughter from the pain of the truth began to shift. I started to realize that by protecting her from the truth, I was enabling the lie. I was allowing this man to destroy her life, her future, from the inside out. The pain of the truth would be terrible, but the pain of living a lie was a slow, corrosive poison. I knew I needed proof. Hard, undeniable proof that my daughter, in her love-struck blindness, could not ignore or explain away. My word against his was not enough. I needed to catch him. But how? I was just an old woman. My world was my home, my garden. His was a world of cell phones, of passwords, of secrets I didn't understand. The idea came to me from the most unexpected of places. My grandson, Laura's nephew, came to visit. He was a tech-savvy teenager, and he was helping me with my old, slow computer. "Grandma," he said, "you know what you should get? One of those little security cameras, like a nanny cam. You can put it anywhere, and it links to your phone. You can see what's happening in your house when you're not there." He was talking about it as a way to monitor for package deliveries or to check on the house when I was out. But in my mind, a new, dark, and brilliant idea began to take root. A camera. A silent, unblinking eye. A witness that could not be lied to. I bought one the next day. A small, discreet one disguised as a digital clock. I told my family it was to keep an eye on the front porch. I placed it on the mantelpiece in the living room, an object so innocuous, so boring, that it was completely invisible. It had a perfect, wide-angle view of the entire room, of the sofa, of the front door. I learned how to use the app on my phone, how to view the live feed, how to record. It was my first real act of rebellion, and it felt terrifying and exhilarating. For a week, I just watched. I watched them live their lives, unaware of my secret eye. I watched my daughter's love. I watched my son-in-law's lies. And then, on a Thursday afternoon, I saw it. Laura was at a parent-teacher conference that would last all evening. Greg came home from work early. And then, the doorbell rang. It was her. Jessica. Too. He let her in, and he kissed her, right there in my living room. A long, slow, hungry kiss that was a declaration of war on my daughter, on my family, on my home. I sat in my bedroom, watching it all on the small screen of my phone, my heart a cold, dead weight in my chest. And I pressed record. I recorded everything. I recorded them drinking my husband's good whiskey on the sofa. I recorded them laughing, their bodies intertwined. I recorded their intimate, secret conversations. Conversations where he complained about my daughter, about her naivety, about his boredom. Conversations where he promised Jessica that he would leave Laura as soon as he had secured the final round of funding for his new business. He wasn't just cheating on my daughter. He was using her. He was waiting until he had extracted every last bit of financial support from me, through her, before he would discard her like a piece of trash. And then I recorded the moment that would become the centerpiece of my revenge. They were talking about their future, about the beautiful house they would buy together. "What about your mother-in-law?" Jessica asked, her voice a sultry purr. "Will she be living with you?" And Greg laughed. A cold, dismissive laugh. "God, no," he said. "The old woman, once the money is sorted, she's going straight into a state-run home, the cheapest one I can find. My only responsibility is to Laura, and that responsibility has a rapidly approaching expiration date." He said it. The quiet part. The ugly, monstrous truth. He had said it aloud. And I had it. I had it all on a small, digital file that was now saved to a cloud, far from his reach. I had the proof. But now, what to do with it? My first instinct was to show it to Laura, to shatter her illusions with this ugly, undeniable truth. But my new, colder, more strategic self held me back. What would that achieve? It would destroy my daughter. It would cause a messy, painful divorce. And he, the charming liar, might still find a way to spin it, to play the victim, to walk away with a portion of my money. No, 2G. That was not enough. The crime he had committed was not just against my daughter. It was against me. It was against my home. It was against my husband's memory. And the punishment needed to fit the crime. It needed to be elegant. It needed to be ironic. And it needed to strip him of the one thing he valued more than anything, his image of success. I looked at the recording again, and I focused on the other person in the room. The mistress, Jessica. She was not just a passive participant. She was an active collaborator in his deceit. She was a willing beneficiary of my stolen money. And in that moment, a new, audacious, and utterly terrifying plan began to form in my mind. I was not going to destroy their affair. I was going to monetize it. I was not going to expose the mistress. I was going to make her my tenant. I was going to take their dirty little secret and turn it into a source of income, a private, humiliating punishment that would bleed them both dry, one secret rent check at a time. The game had changed. I was no longer a spy. I was about to become a blackmailer. The loaded gun. For a week, I did nothing. I just watched them, my two unknowing victims, as they moved through my house. I watched my son-in-law lie to my daughter. I watched my daughter look at him with a love that was so pure it was painful to see. And with every lie he told, with every trusting smile she gave him, the cold resolve in my heart hardened from ice into diamond. My plan was a delicate, dangerous piece of machinery. It required absolute secrecy and perfect execution. One wrong move, one flicker of suspicion, and the whole thing would explode, taking my daughter's heart with it. I had to become a better actor than he was. I had to be the sweet, slightly dotty, harmless old mother-in-law, all while I was plotting a revenge so intimate and so cruel it would become the secret engine of their lives. My first step was to learn about the enemy. Not Greg. I already knew his weaknesses. I needed to learn about Jessica, the mistress. I used the computer my grandson had set up for me. I became a quiet, relentless internet detective. I found her social media profiles. She was a lifestyle influencer, a woman who curated a perfect, beautiful online existence. Her life was a cascade of expensive brunches, boutique shopping sprees, and exotic vacations. A life, I knew, that was being funded by my husband's pension. But I also found her vulnerabilities. I found her online resume. She had recently been fired from a high-powered marketing job for unethical billing practices. She was now a freelance consultant, a euphemism, I suspected, for unemployed and desperate to maintain appearances. And I found her address. She lived in an expensive, trendy apartment building in the city, the kind with a concierge and a rooftop pool. The kind of apartment a woman with no job could not possibly afford on her own. She was as dependent on Greg's, on my money as he was on his own lies. She was vulnerable, and that vulnerability was the key to my trap. My next step was to create a new identity. I couldn't approach her as Margaret Stevens, the wronged mother-in-law. I needed to be someone else. Someone anonymous. Someone powerful. With the help of a discreet online service, I set up a shell corporation, a holding company with a bland, vaguely threatening name, Northwood Asset Management. I opened a post office box under the company name. I bought a new, untraceable burner phone. I was no longer Grandma Margaret. I was a faceless corporate entity. The third step was to deliver the first, quiet threat. I waited for an afternoon when I knew Greg and Laura were both out of the house. And I made my move. I took a taxi to Jessica's expensive apartment building. I did not go up. I simply left a sealed plain white envelope with the concierge. For Miss Jessica Thorne, I said, my voice disguised by a pair of old sunglasses and a scarf. It's a confidential business matter. Inside the envelope was a single high-quality photograph, a still frame from the video I had recorded. It was a picture of her and Greg kissing on my living room sofa. There was no explanation, no threat, just the picture. A single, undeniable fact. I went home, and I waited. I imagined the moment she would open it. The confusion. The dawning horror. The frantic, terrified phone call to Greg. It happened that evening. I was in my room, and I heard Greg's cell phone ring. I heard his low, urgent whisper. What are you talking about? A picture? Where did it come from? No, of course I don't know who it is. His voice was a tight coil of panic. The first crack had appeared in their secret world. I let them stew in that fear for 3 days. I watched them. They were jumpy, paranoid. They would stop talking whenever I entered a room. They were looking at me, really looking at me for the first time, wondering if the quiet old woman in the corner could possibly be connected to the anonymous threat that had just entered their lives. They dismissed it, of course. It was impossible. I was just the sweet, harmless old lady. On the third day, I delivered the second blow. Another envelope, delivered by a courier to her apartment. This time, inside was a short, printed note on plain paper. It read, "Your private life is your own business. But when you conduct it in my client's home, it becomes my client's business. My client has a recording of your entire 3-hour meeting with Mr. Miller on the afternoon of October 12th. My client is not interested in exposing you. My client is interested in a simple, discreet, and mutually beneficial business arrangement. You will be contacted shortly with the terms. In Amityville." It was signed simply, Northwood Asset Management. The phone call that night was not a whisper. It was a full-blown screaming argument. They were trapped, and they were turning on each other. "Who is this?" she shrieked. "Who is their client? Is it your wife? Did she find out?" "Of course not," he roared back. "She doesn't know anything. It must be a business rival. Someone trying to blackmail me." They were so arrogant, so self-absorbed, that the truth, that the client was the quiet old woman whose house they were defiling, was literally unthinkable to them. The final step was the offer, the terms of our new business arrangement. I waited another week, letting their terror marinate. Then I sent the final communication from my burner phone. It was a text message sent to Jessica. It was long, detailed, and utterly professional. Thorne, it began. This is your final communication from Northwood Asset Management. Here are the terms of our agreement. You are currently living in an apartment for which you pay $3,000 a month in rent. You are in arrears. You are facing eviction. My client is prepared to solve this problem for you. My client has a second property, a small but comfortable one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood, which is currently vacant. The rent on this apartment is also $3,000 a month. My client is prepared to offer you a 1-year lease on this apartment, rent-free, free. In exchange for this generosity, you will do 2 things. First, you will continue your relationship with Mr. Miller. Second, you will make a monthly payment, not of rent, but of a discretionary expense reimbursement to my client. The amount of this payment will be $3,000 a month, payable in a cashier's check on the 1st of every month, to be mailed to the P.O. box you've been provided. The video recording of your activities will be held in escrow as collateral. Any failure to make a payment will result in the immediate release of this recording to your lover's wife, your family, and your professional network. Wayne. It was a perfect, diabolical trap. I wasn't just blackmailing her for money. I was blackmailing her into continuing the affair that was funding the blackmail. And the most beautiful part? I didn't have a second apartment, but I knew where I could get one. I took the money from my own savings, the savings they were systematically trying to drain, and I rented a small 1-bedroom apartment across town. I was going to use my own money to create the illusion of their salvation. I was offering her a deal she couldn't refuse. She could keep her lover, keep her lifestyle, and get a rent-free apartment. All she had to do was pay for her silence. The check she would be writing every month would not be for her own rent. It would be for mine. The text message landed like a bomb in their secret world. The beauty of it was that it offered them a way out that was also a cage. Jessica, faced with financial ruin and public humiliation, had no choice. And Greg, terrified of being exposed, had to agree. He had to encourage his mistress to accept a deal from a faceless blackmailer, a deal that would be funded by him, by my money. He was now an active, paying participant in his own entrapment. The 1st of the month arrived. I waited, my heart a nervous, fluttering bird. Had it worked? Had my audacious, insane plan actually worked? And then it came. In my new anonymous P.O. box, there was a single, crisp, white envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $3,000. It was made out to Northwood Asset Management. She had paid. My mistress was now my tenant. And so began the strangest, most surreal 6 months of my life. On the surface, nothing in my house changed. Greg and Laura were still the loving couple. He still had his late-night client meetings with Jessica. But underneath, a secret, toxic river of money and fear was flowing. Every month, like clockwork, a check would arrive. I would use that money, Jessica's money, to pay the rent on my secret apartment across town. The apartment that sat empty. The apartment that was the physical manifestation of my power over them. My revenge was not just financial. It was psychological. I had turned their affair, their source of illicit pleasure, into a dreary, terrifying business obligation. Greg was no longer sneaking off for a secret tryst. He was going to a meeting to ensure his mistress could make her blackmail payment. The thrill was gone, replaced by a cold, sordid anxiety. I watched him begin to unravel. He lost weight. He was drinking more. His charming, confident facade began to crack, revealing the weak, terrified man beneath. He was being bled dry, financially and emotionally, and he couldn't tell a soul. He had to maintain the lie of his successful business to my daughter, while secretly funneling money to his mistress to pay off a blackmailer he didn't know was me. It was a perfect, inescapable prison of his own making. My daughter, my sweet Laura, was the innocent victim in all this, and that was the part that caused my heart the most pain. I saw her worrying about Greg. She saw him stressed and withdrawn, and in her goodness, she assumed it was the pressure of his business. She tried to be more supportive, more loving. Her love, the very thing he was betraying, became his only comfort. The irony was a constant, bitter presence in my home. But I knew I couldn't protect her from the truth forever. The situation was unsustainable. Greg was becoming more and more erratic. The lies were piling up. The secret was a cancer, and it was killing them all slowly. I knew I had to end it, but I had to end it on my terms. The end came on their wedding anniversary. I knew Greg, in a desperate attempt to maintain the facade, would plan something special for Laura. He did. He took her out to the most expensive restaurant in town. While they were out, I acted. I went to my secret weapon, the digital clock on my mantelpiece. I retrieved the tiny memory card. I took the video file, the original, damning evidence of their affair, and I loaded it onto a small USB drive. Then, I wrote a letter to my daughter. In it, I told her everything. The discovery in the garden, the camera, the affair, the blackmail, the rent checks. I explained that I had not done it to hurt her, but to protect her, to strip away the lies so she could finally see the truth. I put the letter and the USB drive into an envelope. When they came home, they were holding hands, smiling. A perfect picture of a happy marriage. I waited until the next morning. I went to Laura while she was alone in the kitchen. I handed her the envelope. "What's this, Mom?" she asked, her smile bright. "It's a story, honey," I said, my voice gentle. "A story you need to read. And watch. I'll be in the garden when you're done." I walked out of the house. I went to my rose garden, the place where this nightmare had begun. And I waited. I snipped dead heads. I pulled weeds. I just waited for the scream. It came an hour later. It was not a scream of terror. It was a scream of pure, heartbroken agony. The sound of a life, a dream, a love, shattering into a million pieces. What happened after that was a blur of tears, of rage, of a pain so profound it seemed to suck all the air out of the world. Laura confronted Greg. He tried to lie, of course. It was his nature. But there was no lying his way out of a high-definition video. The truth, in all its ugly, sordid detail, was finally out. He was gone by that evening. She threw him out. He didn't even fight. He was a broken man, with nothing left to lie for. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my daughter's life. But through the pain, through the grief, she found a strength she never knew she had. The gentle, trusting girl was gone. In her place was a woman who had seen the worst of the world and had survived. Our relationship is different now. The secret I kept, the one I kept to protect her, was also a betrayal of a kind. She understands why I did it, but the knowledge of my quiet, cold, calculated revenge has changed the way she looks at me. She no longer sees a sweet, simple old woman. She sees a survivor. She sees a woman capable of a terrible, quiet fury. And while there is a new distance between us, there is also a new, profound respect. I learned that sometimes the only way to protect the people you love is to do terrible things in secret. I learned that a secret is a powerful, dangerous thing. It can be a prison, or it can be a weapon. It all depends on who is holding it. And I learned that you should never, ever underestimate the quiet old woman in the corner. She is the one who is watching. She is the one who is listening. And she is the one who knows all your secrets. So, if you are out there and you are facing a betrayal that feels too big, too powerful to fight head on, remember my story. Be quiet, be patient, and find their dirty little secret. You'd be surprised what a powerful asset it can be. Thank you for listening to my story. To finally speak of it has been a great unburdening of my heart. If my strange journey has resonated with you, I would be so grateful if you would like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell. In the comments below, I invite you to share a story about a time when knowledge became your greatest power. Love you all. This is Grandma Margaret, and I'll see you in the next story.